Hello everyone, I welcome you all to the module 3rd of this course, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. In this, we will study about the topic of the role of United Nations and the need for SDGs and adoption by the world. The topic. So let me read this preamble for you. This agenda is a plan of action for people, planet, and prosperity. So, as we have seen earlier, this whole initiative revolves around these three aspects, which caters to all the humanity and this planet as a whole. This planet involves its living beings, all sorts of like vegetation, flora, fauna, and everything, and even non-living beings also, all the natures, like elements, rivers, mountains, land, water, all of this combined, and with an intent that there is a prosperity on this whole planet among all the species. Okay, so in a way, if you see, all of these three actually terms encompass the well-being and prosperity of anything and everything. Okay, so if you see in a nutshell, it has like this preamble, it actually talks about serving to this huge goal. Okay, so in a way, this the set of SDGs have like a tremendous like a gravity and like responsibility on its shoulders. It also seeks to strengthen universal peace in larger freedom. Universal peace. So peace which is there for everybody and all the countries and every communities, with freedom, with the larger freedom, that there is like a liberty, there's this freedom of expression, freedom of like accessing opportunities, freedom of sharing with each other, freedom of sharing the resources, and being part of this inclusive growth and development and everything. We recognize that eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. So, without removing the poverty and the extreme poverty, this cannot be called as the sustainable development. So, first and foremost point comes, in order to obtain, like this goal is to eradicate poverty completely. All countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership will implement this plan. We are resolved to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and want to heal and secure our planet. We are determined to take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world onto a sustainable and resilient path. As we embark on this collective journey, we pledge that no one will be left behind. So, the inherent, like a goal of SDGs, that no one is left behind, that no human being, no other species, cannot say that they are not part of like this inclusive growth and development. So that is the intent, that it becomes like a inclusive. So this word actually includes all of like the humanity and every entity into it, that they are part of this like overall goal of like a sustainable development, and they get like some benefit out of it. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets, which we are announcing today, demonstrate the scale and ambition of this new universal agenda. They seek to build on the Millennium Development Goals and complete what these did not achieve. They seek to realize the human rights of all and to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. They are integrated and indivisible and balance the three dimensions of sustainable development: the economic, social, and the environment. So with this preamble, you can understand about the intent and the aim behind these SDGs, that how larger and how inclusive it has become after it progressed from the MDGs, and how it targets to include all of us. Let me take it one by one. For the people, the goals and targets will stimulate action over the next 15 years in areas of critical importance for humanity and the planet. We are determined to end poverty and hunger in all their forms and dimensions, and to ensure that all human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality and in a healthy environment. Ending poverty and hunger, the first two SDGs, like we all know. Okay, so those are the first and like a foremost like a goals, aims, with like this set of SDGs related to the aspect of people, because this is the set of like a group of people for whom all of these efforts are being made. Okay, so the consideration that while maintaining their dignity, irrespective of like the social status, economic status, and from where they come from, their background, so they get like their due respect and equality, considering them all equal as one, and in an healthy environment. So this healthy environment, the moment you call it healthy environment, it takes you to the environmental like a factors and all other like a social factors, all other like a economic factors, where together it constitutes like this healthy environment where one can like live peacefully, live with freedom and enjoy their dignity. Let me take on to the next one, the planet. We are determined to protect the planet from degradation. Well, this is a call which is like a underway in the last like 1 centuries in some form or the other. There is like a degradation of some natural elements, some species of flora and fauna, right, and other elements, right. So how we can stop that degradation, rather how we can take this curvature up of the improvement, including through sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources and taking urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. So if you see very important points for like degradation, and then including through sustainable consumption and production. So we know this age of modernity is being driven by immense consumption, right? Immense consumption of resources, goods, services, anything and everything, right? So this has led to the huge volume of like resources being exploited, resources being exhumed, resources being used, resources being consumed and discarded, and all of that. And this has become become the like a first and foremost factor which has like started causing like imbalances. The plastic like and other like such kind of waste pieces in the water bodies, even at the bottom of the oceans, in the like a topsoil, like these toxic like hazardous substances and waste. All of this, if you see now, is becoming like a ubiquitous like a presence, right? So this is that like a degradation we are talking about, we want to actually correct. Okay, and yeah, support the needs of the present and future generations. Well, we have studied like a Brundtland Commission that report that we have to maintain like that pace at which you can call it as like a sustainable growth and development, so that it remains there for the future generations also. Coming down to the third and last one, prosperity. We are determined to ensure that all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives, and that economic, social and technological progress occurs in harmony with nature. So all human beings can enjoy prosperous and fulfilling lives. So prosperous and fulfilling lives, every needs are fulfilled, every requirement is taken care of. Well, of course, one can improve, one can actually rectify, one can actually correct their luxuries, because this is where things go out of hand. Okay, and consumerism starts like taking a negative role. That economic, social and technological progress occurs in harmony with nature. This is another like an important point, how to establish this harmony with nature. Well, we know like humanity is there on this planet for a long time, and all this while it has been able to live in the sync with the nature. You take example of any vernacular or any local like a traditional value systems or like a cultures and styles, they are actually have they have been like evolving over a long period of time with the contribution of the local humans, their knowledge resource, their interpretations of those local contextual situations, and making best use of the things and resources which are available abundantly around. So this is the inherent philosophy, you can call it as as harmony with nature. This humanity has lived with that. But what happened when this turning point came of a modernization and a fast industrialization and all of that, it took a wrong detour, and now it is going into the a not so appreciable a direction. That's what we need to correct. So that course correction will help us again going back to live with the harmony with the nature. Next point comes of peace. We are determined to foster peaceful, just and inclusive societies which are free from fear and violence. Peaceful, just and inclusive societies. Well, peaceful, we know there is no any form of disturbance or chaos in the society. There is justice, justice as a system is very essential to safeguard against infringing on someone else's rights and needs and things. And then inclusive society, it means which includes anyone and everyone which is a part of our society with the equal rights and equality, right? So that becomes inclusive. We just saw in the previous slide, which are free from fear and violence. So there is no such elements presence in the social structure which hinders with the peaceful living of the people. There can be no sustainable development without peace, and no peace without sustainable development. So both, if you see, they lead to one another. So if this is peace, peace leads to the sustainable development, and in turn sustainable development leads to the peace. Okay, so both, if you see, are complementary to each other, both need each other, both actually nourish each other. Then we come to the point of partnerships. We are determined to mobilize the means required to implement this agenda through a revitalized global partnership for sustainable development based on a spirit of strengthened global solidarity, focused in particular on the needs of the poorest and most vulnerable, and with the participation of all countries, all stakeholders, and all people. The interlinkages and integrated nature of the Sustainable Development Goals are of crucial importance to ensuring that the purpose of the new agenda is realized. If we realized our ambitions across the full extent of the agenda, the lives of all will be profoundly improved and our world will be transformed for the better. So partnership is essential. Well, partnership is needed for multiple things. Partnership is needed for sharing technologies which lead to the greener solutions. Okay. One of the best examples of a success stories we have is plugging the ozone hole. Okay, ozone hole was not a problem of one country or one place or one community. It was a global problem. It was going to hit hard, any and every human being, any and every other living being, whether it is any from animal world, plant world, or birds or aquatic life and other things. So the moment it was going to hit earth with its impact, it was going to hit us hard and to everyone. So there was this collective effort to find greener solutions, and this was facilitated by greener technologies which provided greener solutions to the people across different countries, which was shared by the countries which had this technology. So you see, this is the best example of success stories of a partnership and collective achievement on the sustainable development fronts. Well, there are many more challenges actually world is facing, different countries are facing, and there are solutions existing in the different parts of the world. Why can't this be shared with the help of this partnership, this global mutual partnership, and the people from all other places can get the benefit? With this intent, actually United Nations has framed these SDGs, because these SDGs, if you see, are common for each and every human being. It's not a country specific edition. There is no community or any individual specific edition of it. This is a collective approach needed to be put up by entire humanity for the sake of the humanity. Then we have declaration. We, the heads of the state and government and high representatives, meeting at the United Nations headquarters in New York from 25th to 27th September 2015, as the organization celebrates its 70th anniversary, have decided today on new global sustainable development goals. Well, with this declaration, the set of 17 SDGs were adopted. There are many more points. Maybe you can search to get all of those details. So from here I am moving on to the next topic, the UN's formal roles on the sustainable development. For knowledge and data gathering, it fits into the UN's so-called normative mandate on global issues. It is also an area where the UN can point to many successes. At global level, the jewel in its crown is the work of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Co-owned in the UN system by UNEP, United Nations Environmental Programme, and WMO. On top of this, the UN can point to key global output reports such as the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, UNEP's Global Environmental Outlook, and other besides. Further, exploring possibility of the UN building up a comprehensive system for monitoring the planetary boundaries identified by the Stockholm Resilience Center. UN is defending the principles of sound science and evidence-based policymaking at a time when they face significant challenge. This is most evident in the case of the IPCC and climate policy, but also relevant in other areas. Well, if you see how IPCC has contributed, over the last few decades, is really immense. This scientific investigation, scientific analysis, and data collection and evaluation and processing, pinpointedly of different locations, different places, different phenomena, different species related issues, different country related issues, and overall producing a global report, as such a detailed report, where one can go for action based policy making and implementation strategies. So these are the one of the advantages of such initiative, where you can see how the knowledge base can be generated, how the database can be generated, and how it can be processed for the benefit of the planet. IPCC is one of the wonderful examples of that. Further, it provides deliberative platforms for strategic conversations where one can have dialogue with each other. One can share issues, one can share solutions, one can discuss about, one can formulate common solutions, as well as the data itself. Well, sharing the data itself is also one of the most important things, because with this data you can make some sense out of this data, and you can go for planning your strategies, planning your implementation, and etc. The story of the IPCC provides an especially good example of this, in that the IPCC has provided an anchor for global understanding of the issue and perceptions of its seriousness. As historian of the IPCC, Shardul Agrawal has put it, the more credible experts there were already in the IPCC, the more attractive it was for other established experts to join, and the more internal strength the institution had to defend its scientific integrity against political pressures. Well, you may be aware there were instances where some political pressures were exerted on such initiatives, but this collective effort and validation provided by IPCC on climate change impact, climate change as a phenomena, and repercussions of it gave such a counter arguments to prevail over those political pressure and continue with the aims and objectives of the sustainable development. Further, it helps in supporting intergovernmental decision making, facilitating collective action by its member states, from organizing summit meetings and other decision making forums to supporting treaty frameworks. Further, very important part, financing. Any effort, any initiative needs financing. Okay, where is that come from? Let's see. At present, the most important financing window for sustainability is the global environment environmental facility, which was founded in 1991 and has since then disturbed $10.5 billion in grants as well as a further $51 billion in leveraged co-financing. The GEF, Global Environmental Facility, is overseen by a governing council of 32 constituencies, split more or less evenly between developed and developing countries, and funds agencies including the World Bank, UNDP and UNEP, as well as national governments and civic society organizations. The GEF also acts as the financial mechanism for various multilateral environmental agreements. Where things get more complicated, however, is the extraordinary recent proliferation of financing windows on the climate change. Among the most important are the first one, the World Bank's Climate Investment Fund, CIFs. These include the Clean Technology Fund, the technology we were just speaking of in the previous slides. How this clean and green technology can become useful for some country which doesn't have this as their own asset. Okay, how this technology can go there and get implemented and bring some change, because all of these corrective changes are going to help the whole world collectively. So any such technology which can be used for improvement of the global good is always welcome. So there are these financing mechanisms in place by United Nations in multiple platforms and places which actually carry out such initiatives. On low carbon development, so far the biggest climate fund with nearly 5 billion pledged and 1.9 billion already approved, and the smaller strategic climate fund SCF, $1.3 billion pledged, which in turn includes the pilot program for climate resilience PPCR, $1.2 billion pledged. Forest investment program FIP, $650 million pledged, and scaling up renewable energy program SREP, 400 million pledged. Much of this money is in the form of loans rather than grants. So that is also another a point to note over here. Further, GEF money earmarked for climate change. The GEF Trust funds local focal area on climate change already has just over $1.1 billion approved under the GEF's fourth replenishment round, with a further $1.1 billion placed under GEF5. The GEF also administers the Least Developed Countries Fund, LDCF, $400 million placed, and the Special Climate Change Fund on Long-Term Adaptation Measures, SCCF, $200 million fund placed. Third, we have Adaptation Fund. The AF Adaptation Fund is a financial instrument of the UNFCCC and is financed through a 2% share of emissions reduction certified under the Kyoto Protocol's Clean Development Mechanism. So if you see from where it is coming from, the AF has its own governing board, the World Bank as trustee, and is administered by the GEF. Over the past 2 years, the fund has spent $115 million on climate resilience. Then we have Green Climate Fund, GCF, which was agreed on at the Copenhagen Summit in 2009 as an operating entity of the financial mechanism of the Climate Convention, which is expected to mobilize $100 billion a year by 2020. Well, this is the data from a few years before. From a mixture of public and private sources, although there is so far little clarity on the ratio of the two. Further, in addition, a number of bilateral climate financing windows have been set up by the individual governments, with Japan pledging $11 billion from public sources and $4 billion from private sources. The UK pledging $4.6 billion, Germany pledging $850 million, and Norway pledging $500 million. In the future, it is also possible that financing arrangements on reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation and payments for ecosystem services could emerge to become highly significant. Well, points about climate country level implementation. Finally, there is a role of the UN system in helping to make sustainable development a reality at country level. It is on the ground that it becomes clearest why sustainability fundamentally needs to be understood as a mainstreaming issue, not as a separate standalone area of activity, and still less as a synonym for the environment. In broad terms, the sustainability agenda has two main dimensions at country level. First, there is the need to move towards economies and policies that are sustainable for the long term. Second, there is the corresponding need to build resilience to the consequences of current unsustainability, whether this is local, national or international. So if you see, this agenda has two main dimensions at country level. First, there is a need to move towards economies and policies that are sustainable for the long term. So there is this time factor in mind. Second, there is corresponding need to build resilience to the consequences of current unsustainability, where this is local, national or international. Build resilience because there are several economic downturns also observed in the recent past, and there are disturbances at the social level, at the cultural level and at the ethnic level also in some parts of the world. So how those can be rectified, can be taken care of, that's what we are discussing over here under a country level implementation. And about resilience is defined by DFID as the ability of countries, communities and households to manage change by maintaining or transforming living standards in the face of shocks or stresses. Or more technically, by four of the leading theorists in the field as the capacity of a system to absorb disturbance while undergoing change so as to still retain essentially the same function, structure, identity and feedbacks. So if you see, with this resilience, what do we want to maintain are four things like I mentioned over here: the function, structure, identity and feedbacks. So these are the four things we want to maintain. We don't want it to experience the negative sides of the jerk, but we want it to survive and pass to the next generation and to the next generation and so on. Okay, so for that, resilience is one of the very important strategies which targets a specific communities, places and their livelihoods, and it rectifies any ill practices or irresponsible situations. Further, in practice, a focus on resilience implies two key areas of work. First, it is clear that a number of specific areas of policy are especially relevant to resilience. Among the most important are social protection, disaster risk reduction, climate adaptation, agriculture, given that 3/4 of poor people are rural, and employment, livelihood. So, in a way, it hits to those who are at higher risk, and generally people from lower strata, they are at the higher risk. So how this risk can be minimized, and that set of people can be brought to the mainstream a society, mainstream a economic and social a fabric, and their employment and livelihoods can be taken care of. That's the purpose. The second key area of work implied in a resilience agenda relates less to specific policy areas and more to a government's overall strategic capacity for managing risk and reducing vulnerability. This is partly a technical question, whether the government is able to undertake early warning, whether it has the capacity to innovate under pressure, and whether it has the capacity to work systematically with other governments to reduce risk. So you see, collaboration, engagement, working with each other, sharing our own finances and even defense staff and other things, talks about the maturity or maybe the common fate of this planet. Then we have long-term sustainability in economics and policy. The second key dimension of sustainability at the country level centers on the need to move towards economy and policies that are sustainable for the long term. Two of the most important aspects of this long-term sustainability clearly are the need for low carbon development and for green growth more broadly. So both you can see are complementary to each other. Then we have UN's catalytic role on sustainable development. So let's see this. Finally, there is perhaps the UN's most important role in sustainable development, not its formal mandate on data gathering, supporting intergovernmental decision making, coordinating finance, or even implementing programs on the ground, but its soft role in areas like leadership, agenda setting, and bringing moral pressure to bear on member states. So this is the most important, like a catalytic, like a role to lead, this sustainable development, and play its soft role in areas like, like a leadership, taking the lead at global level and moving things, on the track, agenda setting, targeting, aims and objectives, what needs to be achieved in what time frame and how, and bringing moral pressure to bear on the member states. Well, of course, this will be done by the, member states. So this is where, this complementary role of United Nations actually comes into the, understanding. The political context for sustainable development and the space for UN leadership. The political context for sustainable development has often been extremely dispiriting over the past several years, which have seen numerous disappointments, most obviously in the case of the Copenhagen Climate Summit, but also including the very weak outcome of Rio Plus 20 and the breakup without any outcomes of the 2011 Commission on the Sustainable Development. Well, these summits have definitely, bear the, success stories. These are the platforms, which have brought up, a lot of success stories. But sometimes, the desired goals, desired aims and objectives are not achieved in their entirety in the given time frame. Okay, that becomes, a point to look at, ponder and discuss and rectify. Further, these disappointments have been in keeping with the wider trend in intergovernmental negotiations with other summit processes, the WTO, the G20 and the G8 also failing to agree much action despite a period of pronounced international turbulence. These so-called Z0 dynamics may persist for some time, given the backdrop of an increasingly multipolar world. So if you see a very interesting word over here, multipolar world. Although it is also possible that more frequent and severe shocks, economic, environmental, social, might galvanize governments to recognize and act on global interdependence through more ambitious collective action. Well, how United Nations envisions this, for implementation using this multipolar a worlds a structure where any and every country has equal rights and equal say in the frameworking and implementation of such strategies. At present, the ecological footprint of high-income countries is 3 times as high as that of middle-income countries and 5 times as high as that of low-income countries. So, if you see the ecological footprint of a world's highest impacting country like Qatar is extremely high. Then there are countries from North America, Europe, right? Some countries from from Asia, but majority of Asia, India and African region actually majorly fall under the very low impacting category, where the individual countries share in the ecological footprint is very small. So the domain where a huge correction and rectification needed are the ones which fall under this category. Accordingly, if total resource consumption is to be brought within sustainable limits and low income countries are to grow their economies and improve their material standards of living, then the growing global middle class primarily in developed countries, but increasingly in emerging economies as well, will need to drastically reduce its ecological footprint in order to provide a fair share of limited environmental and resource space for the world's poor. So, the planet has a very finite set of resources which are definitely going to get exhausted if we continue consumption of those resources at the same a pace. So of course it requires a collective effort. Then let's have a look of some facts and hard questions related to every SDG goal. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and here. Then we have adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. Then at its heart are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are an urgent call for action by all countries, developed and developing, in a global partnership. They recognize that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth. So if you see, improving health and education scenarios, reducing inequality in all forms, and spur economic growth, because economic growth also is essential for the overall prosperity, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. Further, the UN is an international organization that was founded in 1945 with the goal of promoting international cooperation and addressing global issues. Well, these details we have already studied, so I'll move on. Some more points, and then we are here on one by one, these 17 SDGs, to see some hard-hitting questions. So if you see such scenarios, into your close to your vicinity, related to poverty and hunger, what do you think the goal is here and why? Why is there so much poverty in the world? Why should I care about other people's economic situation? What can I do about it if I want to? In the zero hunger, well, what's the goal here? How many people exactly go hungry? Any country specific data, any local a community specific data, and why should I care as an individual? How can we achieve this zero hunger? How this can be eradicated, and what can we do to help this situation? The third one, good health and well-being. What progress have we made so far? Because efforts are being made for quite some time. The medical caretaking and all of this is quite old now. So how is it progressing to include every stakeholder of the society, and how can we achieve these targets? Does everyone have access to healthcare? And of course, what can I do to help? In the quality education, why does education matter? Okay, and what are the goals in this SDG? How much progress have we made so far? What challenges remain? Where are people struggling the most to have access to education? Are there groups that have more difficult access to education? And what can we do? Related to fifth, gender equality. What's the goal here and why? How much progress have we made? How does gender equality affect women? Are there any other gender related challenges? Why should gender equality matter to me? What can we do to fix these issues? The sixth one, well, why do we need this SDG? What are the challenges to lack of access to safe water and sanitation? Are water and climate change linked? What can be done? Then we have seventh one, affordable and clean energy. You see the picture over here in the bottom. Why do we need these goals? Why is it essential to address? Why should I care about this goal? How many people are living without electricity and such a data? What are the consequences to lack of access to energy? What can we do to fix these issues? Then we have eighth one, decent work and economic growth. Well, what do you think are the goals over here and why? What does decent work means? How many people are unemployed? That data which will help you, formulate the policies and implementation techniques. What can we do to fix these issues? Ninth, industry, innovation and infrastructure. What are the goals over here and why do we need them? So what's the problem? How much progress have we made? Why should I care? What is the price of inaction? How can we help? So if you see, even if we don't do anything, there is a cost to it. Even if to those who are not participating into it. So participation and being the part of solution is an essential, like a part, then only this can become a success story. Coming to the next one, reduced inequalities. Well, what do you understand are the goals over here and why? What are some examples of inequality? How do we tackle discrimination? Discrimination can be there in like multiple forms based on language, skin color, ethnicity, like a culture, religion, maybe language, like a tone, multiple ways, or maybe even origin. There are multiple, parameters where some form of discrimination can actually happen. Okay, so this must actually get be done away with in all and entirety form. How we can tackle this? How we can achieve equality for everyone? What can we do about it? Then 11th one, sustainable cities and communities. What are the goals over here? You can have a look. And why do we need them? What are some of the most pressing challenges that cities face today? Why should I care as an individual? What happens if cities are just left to grow organically? Okay, if you do not plan them, if you allow it to grow naturally as in like organically by like a human beings, okay, the way they want. If you do not implement like a such a maybe development like a planning schemes and things, okay, what is going to happen? Is it expensive to put sustainable practices in place? What do you know? You can maybe discuss about it in assignments and projects. What can I do to help achieve this goal? Then we have 12th, responsible consumption and production. What are the goals over here and why do we need them? What needs to change? How can I help as a business? How can I help as a consumer? So you see, help is possible, irrespective of your position and in your capacity. In whatever capacity you are, you can definitely help. 13th, climate action. How are people being affected by climate change? A study on that is essential because there are a number of like such examples, like case studies coming on these days where like a climate action is essential. What happens if we don't take action? What can we solve this problem, or is it too late to act? Are we investing enough to tackle climate change, and what can I do to help achieve this goal? 14th, life below water. So what's the problem? Because, well, anyways, we have not seen there, we have not been there, right? So it's difficult to understand and imagine. So what do you think could be the problem in this world? How is the ocean connected to our health? So what can we do? Then we have life on land, the surface of the earth. Well, what do you understand are the goals over here and why? What does loss of forest mean? Like for facilitating growth and development, innumerous number of trees are being felled, like every day across the planet. How this can stop and more greenery, more vegetation can be actually planted. How does it affect our health and what can be done for it? The second last, peace, justice and strong institutions. What needs to be done to address this? Because this is not binding. This is like only recommendatory in nature. So how like this can be taken forward? How does this goal apply to me wherever I live? What would be the cost of not taking it? Finally, we come to the 17th SDG and we can discuss and we can see what are the goals over here and why do we need them? Why does this matter to me? How much progress have we made? How much already is like a progress made across the world, across the different countries? As partners, what would we need to do to to achieve like this agenda? How can we ensure the resources needed are effectively mobilized and monitored, and what can we do to help? With this, we have come to the end of this session, end of this module. Thank you everyone.